Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Ask Me Anything, Optimizing Microsoft Teams with Citrix. My name is Darlene Jaramillo and I will be your host for today's presentation. Our featured speakers for today are Nitin Sharma, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Citrix, and Fernando Clerfin, Principal Product Marketing at Citrix. Before we get started, let me cover a couple of housekeeping details. We will have a dedicated question and answer session at the end of today's presentation and invite you to submit your questions at any time during the presentation using the Ask a Question window in the webinar interface. Also, this event is being recorded and a link to the on-demand version will be sent to everyone in a follow-up email. With that, I will now hand it over to Nitin to start the presentation. Welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Darlene. So this format's actually going to be pretty unique. Normally we'll do these webinars and we go through a number of slides of content. We take like a little bit of handful of questions towards the end. But Fernando and I were chatting because of the fact that we would have a number of actual questions that we're getting from our customers when we released Microsoft Teams optimization for virtual environments back in December of last year. So our format is basically, I'm going to go over a little bit of the brief understanding what optimization for Microsoft Teams is. It's going to be a quick demo, and then we're going to go through some key questions that that we've had submitted from customers over the past couple weeks when we pushed the blog out. We're actually getting feedback from the community to submit your questions that you'd want us and Fernando to answer. There will be some time after the end of this webinar. We'll take probably a couple questions from the live audience. But even after that, if you don't have if we don't get to some of your questions, we will actually take a lot of those questions and address them in a future sort of webinar or blog going forward. So just to kind of go over a little bit of the overview of why it is the significance of optimizing Teams. Teams is a hub for teamwork. There's over about 75 million daily active users today. And then with the dynamics of the current workforce and the workforce environment, you're going to see a lot more uptick in remote users. Teams is actually the fastest growing business app in Microsoft history. It's designed to give users a platform to chat, but also meet, share files, and work in Office 365. But we see it as, there's only 10% of Microsoft's Office 365 install base that's using Teams today. So you're going to see this number continuously expand beyond the 75 million daily active users. So from our perspective, from Citrix, the opportunity, we were uniquely positioned with virtual app and desktop and our WVD integration, our optimization for Teams that we released, and how we use SD-WAN to optimize Office 365. With our goal is basically working together to drive that better user experience. Especially as more users are mobile, they're using multiple devices, shaping the face of, the future of the workforce. And so together, that kind of leads into it. The way we look at it is, we want to keep it really simple. So Teams is, all about simplifying the human-to-human communication and collaboration, whereas the Citrix Workspace, which incorporates Citrix virtual apps and desktops, with intelligence, is designed to organize, guide, and automate the work between people and systems. So we look at it with like the amount of distributed devices that are out there. Traditional Microsoft Teams deployments could expose you to inconsistent configurations, possible security risks, or vulnerable user experiences. By integrating Microsoft Teams with Citrix, together the solutions are designed to accelerate collaboration securely, seamlessly, all about driving that personal productivity across, like the number of devices or wherever that person's working. So kind of like, let me just go a little bit in depth as far as like some of the highlights as far as why you'd want to optimize Teams with Citrix. So when you're looking at it, it's all about just sort of, we lead with the user experience, giving and driving that optimized that experience for that user that's working outside of their traditional local environment or local PC. So it gives employees access to productivity, communication, and collaboration tools. It also gives IT powerful tools to actually centralize, manage a Microsoft Teams deployment. One of the key things I wanted to highlight is customers can use what they have. Teams is part of Microsoft 365, so you can use your existing investments in Microsoft to deploy Teams through Citrix. We ensure security, so you can store chat logs and file exchanges and other data in the cloud instead of that user's device. You get centralized control. You can manage and deliver Teams alongside your existing other virtualized apps and desktops. And IT admins will love, some of the automated workflows that exist, the real-time analytics they're able to obtain, and also the ability to centrally manage and control that corporate data. So again, the Citrix ACF optimization for Microsoft Teams, is driving to deliver the best possible Teams experience within a virtualized or cloud-hosted environment. Currently, Citrix is actually the only vendor that's actually supporting and optimizing Teams for virtual environments right now. And with that, we do have a brief cameo from Rob Beekman. He decided to, showcase and do a recording capture as far as like what it is and what that Teams optimization looks like. And one of the key things is that the environment he's showing that you could also test out today or work with your existing local resellers or your existing account rep to actually see what that optimization looks like in your actual infrastructure.
Yes, thanks. So Mayank and we created that demo video for this. We are going to show a call being made by me, located in the Netherlands, to Mayank, who's in India. I have to go to another screen to do this. So let's go to my desktop and let's see if we can get Mayank to join me. So we have an unoptimized Teams over here. I'm going to show you that Teams is not optimized, and that's because we have a setting which you can set by policy, but I did it manually. I set the MS Teams reader support to 0, and here's Mayank. He's back from yoga, completely happy again, relaxed. But you see that the image is quite pixelated. It's not really the perfect image. So I'm going to put up performance monitor next to it. So here we see the graphics engine. It's taking 10, 14, 15% of CPU. Teams is taking a lot of percentage. So the whole CPU level of the VDA is quite high. And if we look at this again, this is the graphics engine and everything, the movement, everything, it has to be compressed with HTX, and the VDA is taking a lot of load there. So this is quite a bad performance for the video. So now we're gonna close this call and we are going to optimize Teams. Thank you. So I'm gonna first close Teams. Oh, the other button. Sometimes we are too fast with these things, so if I now launch Teams, it may not be optimized instantly and I have to restart it again. It is what it is. I'm impatient mostly in those things, so I don't wait long enough. But let's see what it does. No, this one is not optimized yet, so let's do this one again. It's the demo. Demos, things go crazy sometimes. Now we have a Citrix HTX optimized team. So now again, I'm not sure if Mayank is also ready, but let's start the camera. So here's my camera. Again, I think already the picture is a lot better. So let's see if he can join in. There he's coming. So there's Mayank again. So if we now look at the processes, we now have an optimized Teams running. So we see that the Citrix processes are almost taking no resources anymore. It's almost down to zero, or totally down to zero. You see also the image still building up. He's on a 4G connection somewhere in India, so it's not the best connection that we can work over. But still, the picture is great. The picture is way better than it was, and you see the graphics engine that was taking a lot of CPU before is now down, and CPU levels are really down. And they're slowly, it's still working. It has offloaded. But as you see, also the Citrix logo on the screen is nearly perfect. So, and with that, I want to hand it back to you guys.
So, Fernando, I'm going to hand it over to you. We had one of these questions that came up as far as like, there's a consistent question that we get a lot, and it just shows like, how is this working on in the background? There's a number of questions that this slide actually answers. So I figured I'd just sum it up in this one thing. So like, Fernando, what exactly is going on in the background when you're optimizing teams?
Okay, thank you, Nitin. So the most important thing you got to understand when discussing Teams optimization is the way we package the optimization now. Before, for example, with Skype for Business, RTME and the RTC, those were separate installers that you would install in the VDA and in the client machine, and they were available as MSIs from our website. With Teams, we changed things a little bit. So from now on, all the Teams optimization code is embedded by default into the VDA 1906.2 or higher, and into Workspace App 1907 or higher. So you don't need to manage separate plugins. In this diagram, what I'm showing is the existing component and what's new for Teams optimization. So here, what you can see is a Teams published application in the VDA with no optimization. So everything is rendered via the HDX legacy technologies, webcam redirection, audio and microphone redirection. The application is behaving natively on the VDA. There is nothing different that you would see from the app perspective. The authentication, the signaling, the data collaboration, all that happens natively between the VDA and the Microsoft Cloud. And when we started discussing the optimization architecture for Teams, we decided to introduce an API that we hand over to Microsoft. Thanks to this API, the Teams application in the VDA can now interact with VDA side services. And these VDA services eventually are responsible for opening a virtual channel to Workspace App, where we have a new HDX media engine. It's different from the Skype for Business optimization pack media engine. The new media engine that we're using for Teams, it's based on WebRTC. So it can talk to WebRTC protocol back to the Teams servers, or it can talk directly to another peer. So important to understand is that the Teams services that run on the cloud are accessible in 2 IP blocks. Generally, the Citrix admin would have to consult with his networking team to make the proper configurations on the network side, so the client machine can talk to the Teams servers now. Before, when you publish Teams on the VDA without optimization, all the traffic goes from the VDA to the Microsoft Office 365 servers. But now, since we are splitting the media engine, we are decoupling the media engine from the Teams application and installing it now on the client machine in Workspace App, the RTP traffic, the media traffic will flow from the user's machine directly to the other peer or to the Teams servers. Hence, there are networking requirements that you should revisit with your networking team. My recommendation is to involve your networking team early in the design process or the POC process. There are multiple recommendations that we provide in terms of networking. They're all documented in eDocs. You need to be aware that generally the RTP traffic is very sensitive to proxies and deep packet inspectors, VPNs, and any type of network device that interferes with real-time traffic. So involve your team early, explain to them what the architecture is, the type of protocols that we are going to use. UDP is generally preferred for real-time audio video. If for whatever reason UDP is not available, we fall back to TCP. That's less desirable for multimedia. But the client machine is the one that's going to be establishing the final connection to the other peer or a conference server if you're joining a meeting. Hence, there are networking requirements you need to be aware of. Signaling, authentication, data collaboration, chat, presence, instant messaging, all that is still part of the native Teams application in the VDA. The optimization does not touch those domains, so they are still handled by Teams directly. The media engine supports multiple codecs. They are all documented in eDocs, so you can take a look there. The video codecs supported are BP9 and H.264. There is a difference between the CPU requirements for those codecs. Generally, BP9 is the preferred codec for peer-to-peer calls, and it consumes a little bit more CPU. H.264 is the preferred codec when you join a meeting, and it's more conservative in terms of CPU. And the audio codec is based on Opus for peer-to-peer, and when we do a conference call, we prefer G711.
Cool. Fernando, I can take the next question or kind of move over to the next slide for you. This is like the one that we always got together. One that I've seen from customers come in a lot. Obviously, we optimize Skype for Business. That was leading from the success that led to our optimization for Microsoft Teams. But I figured one of the key things that we had visually is like, what are the different deployment strategies they could do if they're running Skype along Teams?
Yes, so this is called coexistence, and it's a supported deployment model. You can deploy Skype for Business optimization pack and the Teams optimization side to side. There is no limitation to that. Of course, if the media engine from Skype for Business optimization, RTME, is grabbing the peripherals, they are locked and they are not available for other applications like the Teams optimization. So just make sure that your users are aware of that. They cannot access the peripheral at the same time, but both can coexist. After one application releases the peripherals, they are made available for the next app to grab them. So you can install both products in Citrix environments, the real-time optimization pack for Skype for Business and the Teams optimization. Generally, customers, they roll out Teams in phases. Some customers try to first enable calling and meetings in Teams, and some customers decide to only enable chat and collaboration in Teams and still have Skype for the multimedia workloads. Microsoft has a very extensive deployment guide for these coexistence modes. So I recommend you visit their website and refer any question that you have to that source. What I've seen most is where chat and collab, so chat and collaboration are deployed in Teams first. That allows users to get acquainted with the user interface and how to maneuver the Teams UI. And eventually, there is a transition for meetings. And so calling and meetings are now part of Teams, and Skype is deprecated for anything related to multimedia. I do see customers that are brand new to Teams also. So they are not coming from Skype, they're coming from other vendors. So they go for a single Teams deployment from scratch. It's a greenfield opportunity for Teams. So in that case, all the multimedia workloads and all the collaboration scenarios are deployed natively in Teams, and that's what you see at the bottom of the diagram.
Cool, thanks. So I could take some of this to the next one, but I don't know, you may know some more about it. So we got some SD-WAN questions or customers that are on SD-WAN. So there's just some of the main things that I summarized here was does SD-WAN sort of offer any sort of improvements on Teams, and sort of what's it look like?
Yeah, so as I mentioned in the previous slide, the client machine is where our media engine is installed, part of Workspace app by default. Hence, it's critical that we can reach the Office 365 network as quickly as possible. And that's where the Microsoft Teams conference servers are, or transport relays. Hence, the quality of the call will be determined by the quality of the network between the branch office and the Office 365 cloud. Of course, if there is a peer-to-peer call and the two peers have direct LAN connectivity, then we don't need to break out to the internet. But for anything related to conference or when the two peers cannot talk to each other directly, then we must use the Office 365 network to join a conference server or to use a transport relay. Hence, with SD-WAN, this becomes a nice add-on to the Teams offer, because with SD-WAN, we can guarantee that you enter the Office 365 cloud as quickly as possible. We are direct, or as direct as possible in terms of routing. And this will translate eventually into a better user experience. So what we see out there is that when you enable SD-WAN to optimize the real-time traffic destined to Office 365, the mean opinion score, or the MOS score, can jump from the 1 to 3 range to 4. So that's a huge improvement in user experience. Things like packet deduplication and other technologies that SD-WAN introduces allow us to increase the user experience, and we highly recommend that for Teams. If you have not explored that, this is documented in eDocs, and there are also YouTube videos that you can find where we show this in a live environment.
Cool. So as I was mentioning earlier, the format that we were going through, those were the slides that we covered from. We kept getting repeat questions, so we decided that we would put visuals to those questions and have Fernando kind of address those individually to kind of capture a lot of the questions that were related to what we just covered. So I'm going to see, I'm going to go through now a lot of the more of the submitted questions that are a little bit more unique, and then sort of like run down the actual list of questions, and I'm going to tee it up for Fernando. So let me know if you're ready, Fernando, and I'll go ahead and start asking.
Yeah, this is the main part, so let's see what we have.
Okay, so the first question I got, I'm going to avoid using the customer's names, but we have a question as far as where is HDX optimization in Mac and screen sharing in VDI Teams MSI installation. How's that?
Okay.
I phrased that right. I just took it word for word. Go ahead.
Yeah. So let's address the elephant in the room. Support for other platforms. So Linux and Mac here are in discussion. So with Linux, let's start with that one. We released the tech preview in Citrix Workspace Hub 2004, and the tech preview phase is now over. So we gather feedback from customers, we gather feedback from our thin client vendors, we analyzed everything that came back, we discussed it with Microsoft, and we are very close to releasing the next version of Workspace Hub for Linux that will support as GA, the optimization for audio, video, and screen sharing. Updates will be posted in a blog very soon, so make sure that you are tracking our blog here and the eDocs documentation. So good news on the Linux side, stay tuned. On the Mac side, we are working on that as we speak. We understand that these COVID-19 days changed the landscape in terms of the user devices. Before, Mac used to be sort of a BYOD type of device, or maybe some selected group of users, like executives, prefer to use their Mac devices. And in terms of adoption, Mac has increased significantly since March because of the pandemic. So we are working on Mac as we speak, and we will make an announcement on the tech preview very soon. I hope you can get in touch with your account manager so they can in turn get in touch with the product team, and we will update you on the date. It's currently under NDA, but we have news there, and we are always willing to share it with customers that have an active NDA. For Mac, we will somehow progress with a similar fashion that what we did for Linux. We will do audio optimization first, and then we will add video and screen sharing, and there's going to be a tech preview, and from there we will progress into GA and add more features on top of it. But yes, we are aware of the problem. We are aware that Mac has performance issues when you try to use it natively on Teams as is today, and the optimization pack it's a must-have. So So we invested on that. We carved out a group of engineers that are coming from our old Skype for Business optimization pack, and there are also engineers that we are putting into the solution from other geos or other development centers that we have in Citrix. So we are putting as many resources as we can to accelerate the development and hope to have the good news very soon. So that's for the two big workspace app platforms. If you can go to the next slide, let me see.
Okay, go ahead.
So I wanted to share a few of the insights that we are gathering since we released this in early December. So it's been 6 months now since we have this in GA, and there are important topics to cover. Generally, every question that I get either falls into one of these 4 buckets. So I'll go one by one, and I have a list of questions also that you guys submitted online, so I'll go over those too. But most important is the Teams installation. So there are multiple ways to install Teams, and this is vastly documented in eDocs. I strongly suggest you go to the Teams section in eDocs and read this. It has recommendations on every mode of installing Teams and profile management recommendations. But in essence, there are 2 ways. You either use the per user installer in Teams, what goes under the app data folder, or you use the MSI that is available for Teams installation, and you run the MSI from the command line with a couple of flags that will install Teams in program files. It will still use app data for some of the installation, but the core installer is in program files, which is what we want in VDI. Or CNAP-based installations on Windows Server. So make sure you read that documentation. I strongly recommend to use the MSI with the command line flag. That it's the recommended way to do it in Citrix, unless you have dedicated persistent VDI where you have no problem of installing Teams under the user's profile. But for any other scenario, pool VDI or Windows Server-based installations, I recommend strongly recommend the MSI with the all user equal 1 flag. Now it comes to resource. So with Teams installed properly, there is a strong demand from customers to reduce the footprint of Teams. That's why we released the optimization pack. So that will take care of all the multimedia. But still, the Teams application is seen as an application that consumes a lot of RAM and CPU. I can tell you that Microsoft is aware of this request, and they are working on reducing the resource on every release. We have raised every feedback that we got from customers to Microsoft. Customers talk to Microsoft directly to reduce the resource consumption. There are a few things you can do to reduce it further. For example, you can disable auto start of Teams, and that will prevent log on storms in the morning from making Teams auto start, which will increase your CPU, IOPS, RAM. So you can disable that. That's documented in a CTX article, CTX 253754. So you can see a lot of recommendations there. So disabling auto start is one way to reduce the footprint. If your virtual machines do not have a GPU, then you can disable the option in the Teams settings to use a GPU, and that will preserve CPU. So again, the same CTX article 253754 has a recommendation on how to do that. And yeah, deploy the optimization pack. That of course will reduce the Teams footprint when it comes to multimedia. So anything that's audio, video, screen sharing, it's offloaded to the client, and that's how we preserve the VDA resources. The other big topic, probably the number one, it's the feature gap. So we are aware that the experience is different between a native Teams application and Teams running on VDI when it's optimized. And there are a couple of big requests that where we find ourselves joining meetings exclusively. And we are aware of that limitation. Microsoft is aware of that limitation. We want to fix that as soon as possible. It's a request that we have been getting over and over again, and there will be news very soon. We can share the ETA for that feature under NDA, so make sure you contact your account manager, or you contact your account manager for Microsoft directly, since that feature depends on a Microsoft Teams rollout. So whenever Microsoft is ready to make that change, they will deploy it via feature flags, and then every user will be able to enjoy it with signing out and signing back in without upgrading any other component. But for a specific ETAs, please contact Microsoft directly, or you can contact us and we can provide more info also. And the other big one is screen sharing from chat that has been requested very frequently. Microsoft also has good news there. We expect to have the public announcement soon. If you need an ETA and you want to know exactly when it's coming, again, please contact your Microsoft account manager or get in touch with your Citrix account manager and we can tell you what's the ETA. There have been a few others that people are requesting, background blurring, and that's another big one. Give take control, that's another one that people ask all the time. Hit support, so support for hit commands on the peripheral. Support for webcam H.264 encoding, that's also one that's been requested. So we are aware of all these and we have plans for them. We can share the ETA under NDA. All I can say is that we are not going to let much time pass until we deploy all these features. We understand that there are different user experiences when you do a Teams native or when you do a Teams in VDI, and we want to close that gap as soon as possible. We'll strive to make that gap close on every release that we do. So please stay tuned. On every Workspace app, generally, on every Workspace app release that we put out there, there is a feature gap that's knocked out. So, for example, in 2006.1, we released new features. In 2002, there were new features also introduced. So every Workspace app that we put out there, generally it's where the feature gap is closed. And that's important, right? Since our media engine is in Workspace app, that's where we put most of our improvements. So I generally recommend customers to keep up with the Workspace app current release track and not go to the LTSR track when it comes to Workspace app. Even though we do support the 1912 Workspace app LTSR when it comes to Teams optimization, you might find yourself limited very soon because the LTSR cannot receive new features, only security and bug fixing. Hence, you will be missing out on all the further improvements that we're going to introduce. So if you do go for the Workspace app LTSR, then make that decision consciously. Look at the feature gap, understand what's not going to be introduced as a feature in the LTSR, and if the current feature set is enough, then you are welcome to use the 1912 LTSR. But if you are looking for features that are not there today and that will require a Workspace app upgrade, then the current release it's the way to go. So again, we are fully aware of the gaps. We are working on closing that as soon as possible, and we can share under NDA what's the plan till the end of the year for reducing this. We also want to release a public website with roadmap that's on the works, but so far it's only under NDA. Lastly, another big bucket for questions is troubleshooting. So CTX 253754, it's your master resource for anything that requires troubleshooting. It's not only a troubleshooting source, it's also a live update document. So anything that happens that requires communication, for example, known issues or fixed issues, or recommendations based on what we see out there in terms of reducing resource consumption. So there is a live section update at the very top, and I strongly recommend you check that or subscribe to an RSS feed, because that article is maintained weekly with every update possible that we have on Teams. We put it there, and we try to enable the admin to be able to troubleshoot for himself if for whatever reason you follow that article and you are still having the problem, then you should contact support, because there is a requirement for gathering further logs or CDF traces that tech support would be able to help with. Okay, so those are the main buckets that I have, Nitin, for the Q&A.
Cool. I just got a couple of small ones, if you don't mind answering them, and then we can take audience questions in a few minutes too. Does that work?
Yes, let's do it.
So I got one. This seems pretty simple. I don't know if you touched on this one. What's the difference between Teams on a physical device and an HDD optimized? I think that's just. I think we've pretty much covered that, right?
Yeah, but it's an important one. So beyond the feature gap that I just mentioned, and that's documented in eDocs, there are a few changes that the Teams application will apply to itself if it detects it's running on a VDA. One is it will disable GFIS, so we preserve CPU consumption. Remember that everything that moves on a screen, we gotta remote it with HDX thin wire, so that consumes CPU. And GFIS being a notorious example of screen share updates, so we decided to disable that to preserve VDA resources. And the other one that Teams will disable if it detects a VDA is background effects. Microsoft is aware of that one, so there are plans to tackle that one. But other than that, once the Teams application is installed in the VDA and you start a call, the limitations that you're going to face are documented in eDocs. So, for example, screen sharing from chat, that button is missing, but we will address that one soon. So in order to start screen sharing, you need an active call. The buttons, so the control bar, instead of being a floating control bar, it's now docked at the bottom of the Teams UI. Gallery view, that's also one that we are fully aware of a limitation. So there are a few that we plan to close very soon, and they are mostly documented in eDocs. So I suggest you go there and take a look of the difference between the native Teams and Teams in VDI.
Okay. Yeah, one more, and then I'll start to get some audience questions. So, what are some of the audio-video codecs does optimization for Teams support? Is there a list available?
Yeah, so I covered that in the previous slide, and that's in eDocs also. And feel free to jump to the eDocs section that talks about codecs, and you'll see them. So, in short, BP9 and H.264 are the video codecs, and for audio we have Opus and G711 and a few others.
Cool. Okay. So I'll start. Before we get to the audience questions, I kind of wanted to wrap. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. Let me address this one because it came a lot. So in terms of resource consumption on Workspace app, not on the VDA but on the Workspace app. So our media engine will utilize the resources in the client machine, and it's important to understand that some endpoints are low powered. So we have thin clients that have very limited resources, and we have fat clients like a Surface device that are very powerful in terms of resources. So the Teams optimization code includes an estimator that will try to assess what's the endpoint's capabilities in terms of encoding power. So starting from Workspace app 1912 or higher, there is a new piece of code that we introduced that can assess what's the endpoint's capability for encoding and what's the maximum resolution it could sustain. So then we can take the proper decision. If the endpoint will never be able to do 720p, then our performance estimator will limit that and will cap itself at 360p or 240p. So I recommend Workspace app 1912 or higher. If you're on the current release, Workspace app 2006.1 is the best for Teams optimization because it contains a much more accurate performance estimator. In addition to the performance estimator, we also introduced registry keys on the client that you can tweak, and you can determine if you want to use VP9 or H264. For example, if you want to preserve CPU as much as possible, you can disable VP9 and stick to H264. That will give you better CPU consumption. And you can also hard code what resolutions you want to achieve. If you already know that your thin client cannot cope with anything beyond 360p, you can hard code that. So that will allow us to preserve CPU consumption. So there are a few things that we introduced for low power thin clients, and they are also documented in eDocs, in the Workspace app section of eDocs. So you can take a look there and either test or roll it out as a pilot and cap the resolutions and codecs. Okay, yeah, back to you, Nitin.
Thanks, Fernando. So I'll just close up. Again, we together work with Citrix and Citrix and Microsoft together work to make sure that we're optimizing and delivering some of that best Teams experience. We also integrated some of the aspects of Citrix Workspace with intelligence within, if you're delivering Teams within your Citrix environment and you have Citrix Workspace with intelligence. So a lot of that features that new, intelligent feeds or micro app capabilities. So like, for example, you can send micro app notifications directly to Teams. There's a virtual assistant that's embedded in Teams. Some of the things that it can do is basically, offer the, you get asked questions, execute tasks. You can streamline difficult, time-consuming tasks across your connected workspace apps using a single Teams bot. You can integrate it with, existing on-prem applications or your SaaS apps. And the key thing is that you get centralized authentication across all your apps. We do have dedicated, we do have other content available like that. I suggest working with your account managers or your local reseller to see exactly how Citrix Workspace with intelligence and design and sort of delivers a really improved productivity experience and overall user experience for those end users. And then, just basically next steps, we have an ebook available on more.citrix.com, Microsoft Teams or MS Teams. That way you can see a little bit more information on sort of how it is that we are, working together on delivering an optimized Teams experience. If there's any other questions too, you could also just submit them directly to me. I'll end up forwarding them to Fernando anyway, but nitin.sharma@citrix.com. And again, I said, request a visit with your Microsoft MTC or your local Citrix, technology center for a little bit more in-depth or broader presentation. So with that, I'll hand it over to Darlene. So I think we have a couple of minutes, so we could probably take some audience questions.
Thank you, Nitin. Now, as we move into the Q&A, I would like to remind our audience that if you have a question, please submit it in the Ask a Question area on your screen. Simply type your question into the text box and then hit Submit. Our first question is, what is the max currently supported webcam resolution via Teams optimization?
So Fernando, I could answer that, or if you know.
So, well, since Mac is not optimized right now, the resolution that will be presented to Teams, it depends eventually on the VDA version. So you could have a VDA version like 7.15 that it's not up to date in terms of the maximum resolutions achievable. So you would achieve a lower resolution. I think it's like 240p or 360p. Then we scale the image up, but that's the native resolution. And importantly to understand is that Mac, in terms of webcam, has limitations. So for example, if the Teams application on the VDA is 64-bit, we cannot do webcam redirection with Mac today. We are working on that. We want to remove that limitation so you could use 64-bit Teams and still achieve webcam redirection. I can give you an ETA for that one if you contact us. But yeah, Teams today is not optimized for Mac, so we must rely on webcam redirection legacy technologies. In the future, once we introduce a Teams optimization for Mac, then we will support higher resolutions up to 720p.
Thank you, Fernando. We have 3 more questions in queue. The second question is, does screen sharing use H.264 or VPN?
Screen sharing uses VP9 for transmission, yes.
All right. Our third question is, are there any recommended headsets or webcams?
Yeah, so if you go to the eDocs section for Teams, you'll see a section about peripherals. We support whatever is already certified by Microsoft as a peripheral for Teams. So that certification should carry over to Citrix. And there are some limitations today, for example, hit support on the peripherals. We're missing that, so you cannot use the answer or end buttons on the peripheral to answer the call or end the call. And we're working on that. But the cameras that I see a lot out there are integrated cameras, a lot of Logitech cameras. So yeah, if the camera is supported by Microsoft Teams, then it's also supported in our environment, and you can see a list in our eDocs documentation. Yeah, then of course the other big question in terms of certification is the thin client. So that's done by Citrix Ready. I recommend you also check our eDocs section for Microsoft Teams, and you'll see a link there that points you to the Citrix Ready website with the currently certified devices. I remember from Dell, HP, Tenzing, so they are already listed in the website. The system requirements for the thin clients are also listed in eDocs. The main point to drive is that quad-core thin clients will be the recommended ones, but if you have dual-core thin clients, they could also work as long as the CPU can meet certain speed requirements and that it can do turbo. So AMD or Intel CPU architectures that can do turbo boost. Again, that's in eDocs, in the system requirements.
Thank you very much, Fernando. And then we have our last question. Are inline controls on headsets supported?
Yeah, so that's the one I just addressed. So that's hit support. And you can use, for example, the volume up, volume down, because that's processed natively by the operating system. But answer call or end call, they have to be supported by our media stack first. And that's a missing feature that we are aware, and we plan to remove that limitation, just like we did with Sky for Business. So yeah, stay tuned there.
Okay, thank you very much. That brings us to the end of our presentation. I would like to thank Nitin and Fernando for a very informative presentation, and also thank our audience for joining us. A quick reminder, you can check out and register for upcoming webinars and events by going to citrix.com/events. We hope you have a wonderful day.